Two raised beds can look completely identical from the outside. They can have the exact same cedar walls, receive the same hours of morning sun, and be planted with the same heirloom seeds in the middle of spring. During the first season, both beds thrive, producing deep green leaves and heavy yields that make the investment feel entirely worth it. But by the time the third summer arrives, an invisible division occurs. Inside one bed, the roots hit an unseen barrier. The soil level has dropped 4 inches below the rim. The surface feels like stale cake, and the plants stop growing before they ever manage to set fruit. The second bed, however, remains soft, productive, and resilient. The difference between these two gardens was determined long before the spring seeds arrived. It is driven by a silent, widespread mistake that happens in almost every backyard garden, treating the soil inside a raised bed like a permanent foundation rather than a moving, living system. When we build a raised bed, we tend to view the soil mix as a static fixture, much like the wooden or metal walls that contain it. We buy our blends, fill the box to the top, and assume the physical structure will remain unchanged year after year. But the plant shows the symptom, and the soil holds the answer. If your raised beds are reaching their 3rd or 4th year, you are likely noticing the classic indicators of a deeper structural trap. The most obvious sign is the drop. You might find that you can see several inches of the inside of your wooden frames that used to be completely buried under dark earth. At the same time, you might notice a strange behavior when you water your garden. A heavy downpour or a long soak from the garden hose seems to sit on the surface for a moment, then rapidly disappears down the inside edges of the wooden walls, leaving the center of the bed surprisingly dry just a few inches beneath the surface. Your crops might show pale, yellowing lower leaves early in July, or their stems might remain thin and fragile despite regular feeding. That sounds like a water or nutrient problem, but it usually starts much lower down in the system. To understand why an older raised bed begins to fail, we have to look at what happens to a fresh soil mix over 36 months of active gardening. In that spectacular first year, your raised bed is highly productive because the mix is filled with microporosity. It is typically a loose blend of compost, peat moss, and perhaps some coarse vermiculite or aged wood shavings. This combination creates a vast network of tiny air pockets. Roots move through this environment with total freedom, absorbing oxygen and finding moisture held gently between the spaces. Over time, however, a relentless physical process takes place. The soil biology goes to work. Billions of microscopic bacteria and fungi consume the organic carbon within the compost and peat moss. As they digest these materials, the solid structure is broken down, and the carbon is released into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide gas. This means that the actual physical mass holding those vital air pockets open is literally vanishing into thin air. Without that carbon skeleton to keep the pieces apart, gravity takes over. Every time you water, and every time winter snow settles on the bed, the fine mineral particles sink lower, packing tightly together. The large air pockets collapse into tiny spaces, and the loose, spongy mix transforms into a dense, airless block. This is where most gardeners get misled. When they see their soil level sinking and their plants struggling, the natural instinct is to run to the garden center, buy a few heavy bags of standard topsoil or cheap potting mix, and dump them directly onto the surface to fill the empty space. But this common correction actually accelerates the failure of the bed. Standard topsoil is highly dense and contains heavy clay and silt particles. When you place this heavy weight directly on top of a lower layer that is already losing its air space, you compress the remaining structure even further. You are effectively placing a heavy lid on top of a suffocated system, trapping stagnant moisture at the bottom while preventing fresh oxygen from reaching the deeper roots. The roots of your tomatoes and peppers hit this dense lower zone and flatten out sideways, unable to penetrate the compacted floor. This is not about buying expensive miracle additives or tearing down your wooden frames. The fix is not to simply add more volume. It is to change what the soil can actually hold. Before you apply any material to an older bed, you need to know exactly where the restriction lies. You can perform a simple, reliable field test using nothing more than an ordinary 10-inch metal screwdriver. When the soil is moderately damp but not soaked, gently press the screwdriver straight down into the center of your raised bed using only the palm of your hand. In a healthy, well-structured bed, the metal shaft should slide in smoothly all the way to the handle with minimal resistance. If your screwdriver plunges down 3 or 4 inches and then hits a hard, unyielding stop, you have diagnosed a structural collapse. You have found the hidden ceiling that is turning your raised bed into a shallow, unproductive container. Once you see it this way, the symptom makes sense, and the correction becomes clear. To restore an older bed without turning the soil upside down or destroying the delicate microbial networks that still exist, we must use a specific restoration protocol. The goal is to reintroduce structure and air without burying the bed under dead weight. If your bed is currently empty between seasons, begin by using a sturdy garden fork. Insert the tines straight down into the compacted lower layer every 6 inches across the entire surface. Instead of turning the soil over, simply rock the handle back and forth a few inches. This gentle leverage creates deep, vertical fissures through the compacted zone, opening paths for air and water without disrupting the existing biology. Next, you must fill the empty volume using a specific structure-building blend rather than plain dirt. The ideal restoration mix consists of 2 parts coarse, well-aged compost and 1 part dark, flaky leaf mold or partially decomposed, clean wood flakes. Leaf mold is an exceptional material for older beds because its irregular, fibrous shape recreates the long-lasting pore space that the original soil mix lost. Lay this structural blend down until it reaches about an inch below your desired depth. Because this material is coarse and full of carbon, it will not compress into a dense block. Instead, it provides a stable, aerated blanket that allows the lower layers to breathe. To complete the protocol, never leave this new surface exposed to the baking sun or the compaction of heavy rain. Cover the restoration layer with a thick, 2-inch mulch of clean, coarse straw or shredded autumn leaves. This protective blanket dampens the physical impact of water droplets, preventing the fine particles from washing down and sealing the pores you just created. If your raised bed is already planted, and you cannot use a garden fork without damaging established root systems, you can still adapt this method. Apply a 3-inch layer of pure, coarse compost directly around the base of the plants, keeping it an inch away from the green stems. Do not mix it in. Allow the earthworms and deep soil microbes to do the physical work for you. As they move up to consume the fresh organic matter, they will carve out thousands of tiny channels from the compacted lower depths up to the surface, slowly re-establishing the natural movement of oxygen and water. Within a few weeks of restoring the structure, the behavior of the bed shifts entirely. When you water, the moisture no longer runs away to the wooden edges. It sinks evenly and deeply into the center of the bed, held safely like a sponge. The lower leaves of your crops stay dark green, because their roots can finally reach the nutrients that were previously locked away in the airless, compacted zone below. A raised garden bed is not a permanent box of dirt that you build once and forget. It is a dynamic, consuming system that requires a steady, thoughtful return of structural carbon. When you look at your garden beds this season, do not just look at the plants on top, and do not see the boxes as mere containers for dirt. See them as living, breathing structures that need air just as much as they need water. Once you understand the physical space beneath the surface, you stop chasing symptoms with quick fixes, and you begin giving the soil exactly what it needs to sustain life for the long haul.